Simon Says subscribe and click on the bell icon to receive notifications.
We've made the accompanying exercise files for this tutorial available for free. Just click the link below in the video details to get these.
In this section of the course, we're going to take a look at interactive dashboards, and we're going to build our own interactive dashboard from scratch. Now, it's worth noting that when it comes to interactive dashboards, they can get very, very complex. And we're definitely not going to have time in this course to cover all of the methods you can use to create interactive dashboards. What I would recommend you do is, if you watch these lessons and you think to yourself, yes, I want to know more about that, I highly encourage you to check out our Interactive Dashboards course, which goes into a lot more detail. What I really want to do in this section is just really introduce you to the concept of interactive dashboards and show you how you kind of need to go about putting them together. So let's start out in this first lesson just by discussing exactly what an interactive dashboard is. Well, you're pretty much looking at one. A dashboard is where you gather together all different types of analysis and display them on one worksheet. And this dashboard as a whole can give people a really good idea as to what's going on in the business. For example, this is a sales dashboard for the Myriad Group, which is showing sales data from 2018 to 2020. And the way that I've set this up, we've got some headlines at the top here, which shows us some key stats at the top of the page. So I can see the products that have got the highest number of orders, the product that has the highest costs, and the most profitable product. And information like this can help us make better business decisions going forward. Underneath, I have some gross sales figures for the year that is selected in this drop-down box for each of the different countries. And then underneath, we have some charts which shows various different pieces of data. So for example, units sold by country, the number of orders by product, and then we have a line chart that shows product, cost versus profit. And the cool thing about this dashboard is that the way that we've set it up is that if we click this little drop down and switch this to 2019, all of the figures and all of these headlines update and pull through the relevant data. Now, in order to put together a dashboard like this, it requires a number of different skills. So if we go back to the first tab, we always start off with our raw data set, and that should always be in a table. Then from this raw data set, I then have a calculations page. And this is where I do a lot of my calculations, which feed through to the dashboard. For example, I can see my calculations here that I need to set up that drop-down box where we select the year. I then have the calculations that I need for the column chart, and then this table houses all the other calculations and the data that we need for the other two charts that we have on the dashboard. And then finally at the bottom, this is what I need for those high-level headings at the top of the page. And everything all links through. So for example, if you take a look at the calculations here for the combo box, notice that currently it says selected year, and I've made a little spelling mistake there. Let's just quickly change that. Selected year, that's better. Notice that it says selected year 2019. Now that's because in the dashboard, currently I have 2019 selected in this combo box. But if I was to click this and change it to 2018 and go back to the calculations page, notice that this has updated down here. So everything links through nicely. The other three tabs highlighted in blue down here are where I have my different charts that I'm using on the dashboard. And again, these have all been created in a way so that when we change the year in this drop down, the charts automatically update. So we've got a few different techniques going on here. And I would also recommend, if this is a subject that you'd like to explore more and you're interested in different ways that you can design interactive dashboards, I always recommend jumping onto Pinterest and just having a little search for Excel dashboards and taking a look at some of the amazing designs that other people do. Now, another point worth noting here is that I've created all of these charts just here, not using pivot tables or pivot charts. These are effectively just regular charts. They're not using pivot data. Now, a lot of people do use pivot tables and pivot charts on their dashboards, and they'll also use slicers to filter that data. And if you want to do that, that is absolutely fine using the techniques that we've learned in the last section. But I thought we'd do something a little bit different here and use a little drop down to control the data that we're seeing on this dashboard. So you're going to get to learn another skill as well, and that is using things like combo boxes. So over the next couple of lessons, we are going to build out this dashboard. It is pretty intense, and if you find it a bit much, I would recommend just watching it a few times and going through it slowly. But this is what we're aiming for. Let's get started. So let's start assembling this really cool interactive dashboard. Now, just to make things a little bit quicker, I've already done part of the dashboard design. Now, the way that I've done this is just basically using shapes and text boxes. So this green background is just a rectangle shape, this is another rectangle shape, and all of these labels are just text boxes, and I've just formatted the text inside. So I will say that before you start to build your interactive dashboard, it's always good to have a plan. Think about the kind of information that you want to display on that dashboard before you even start to do calculations and put together charts. So I've established the information that I'm interested in, I've got those headings on my dashboard, and the only other thing I've really done here is that I've turned off the grid lines so I have a nice clean page. The rest of these tabs, I've pretty much removed everything that I had on these so I can show you how to build them. And on the calculations page, I don't have any of the calculations in here, I just have these headings. And of course, on the pivot tables page, there is our source data. So if we jump back to the dashboard, the first thing I'm going to add onto here is that little combo box drop down. And this is key to this entire dashboard because depending on the year that we select in that drop down, that is going to determine the data that we see. Now, this is something we haven't covered in this course, and if you choose to go through the advanced course, there is a lot more on form controls. But let me just give you a little sneaky peek as to what these can help you with. Now, form controls, you're going to find them on the developer ribbon. Now, by default, you may not have your developer ribbon turned on. If you don't, jump into File, go down to Options, and then on Customize Ribbon, just make sure you have a check next to Developer. And let's click on OK. So now I have my developer ribbon, I want to insert a form control. And the one that we want to use here is this one, the combo box drop down. So let's click. Notice that my cursor has changed to a small cross and I can now draw my little combo box control. Like so. So I get a little drop down arrow. Currently it's not showing me anything because I haven't specified what I want to put in there. So what do I need to go in here? I need the years to go in there. And in my data set, we basically have 3 different years, 2018, 2019, and 2020. And this combo box needs to get that information from somewhere. So this is where we're going to go across to our calculation sheet. Now, the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to get a unique list of the years contained within my data source. Now, for this, we can use an Excel function that I use all the time called unique. All we need to do is jump across to the pivot tables worksheet and select the column that we want to extract unique values from. So that is column M, the year column. Control Shift down arrow to select the entire range. Hit enter, and would you take a look at that? We now have our unique list of years. If you have a fairly small list, you can also just type them in. I could have done that, but I chose to use unique. Now with this, you don't really want to have that unique formula sitting in the background. So I'm going to do my little copy and paste values trick. So let's highlight the values, Control C, go up to Paste Special and just paste those values. And that will effectively throw away the underlying unique formula. Now I actually want to sort these years, so 2018 is at the top. So let's right click, go to Sort and do Smallest to Largest. Now what I'm going to do is down here in selected year, I'm going to do an index formula. So we're going to type in index. We're going to index this array just here, F4 to lock. And the next argument we need here is the row number. Now the row number is going to be in cell A12. F4, close the bracket, hit enter. Now if I type in number 1 into here, it's going to tell me that 2018 is number 1 in that list. Number 2 is 2019, number 3 is 2020. So this is how we want this to function. Now that we have our years, we can use this unique list to populate the combo box on the dashboard. So let's go back to the dashboard, let's select our control, and then on the developer ribbon, we're going to open up the properties for this control. And this is where we can select our input range and our cell link. So our input range, which is basically where are the values we want to populate this combo box, well, our input range is on our calculations worksheet, and it's this range just here. What about the cell link? Well, again, on the calculations page, this is going to be our cell link, A12, and click on OK. So now if I go to this drop down, I have my different years in here. So if I select 2018 and take a look at the calculations page, you can see that there the selected year is 2018 and the selection is number 1. If I change this to 2019 and take a look at my calculations page, you can see that all of these formulas are updating correctly. And this is really the key to this entire dashboard. So make sure that you get this combo box drop down correct. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to prepare the data that I'm going to use in my column chart. And my column chart is basically going to display the units sold by country. Now this is where we need to use a sum-ifs formula, another skill that we've practiced in this course. What I want to do is basically look at my source data and say sum together the units sold whenever you find the country Japan, India, United Kingdom, so on and so forth. But we have an additional piece of criteria because we want this also to relate through to whatever year is selected. Because on the dashboard, if we've selected 2019, we only want to see the amount of units sold for 2019. So that is why we use sum ifs, because we have two pieces of criteria to add. So what is our sum range? Well, it's the units sold. So let's go across to pivot tables and let's go all the way to the top and find our units sold column, Control Shift down arrow to select, comma. Our next argument is criteria range 1. Well, we're breaking this down by the country. So my criteria range is going to be the country, Control Shift down arrow, comma. What is my first piece of criteria? Well, if we jump back to the calculations tab, we wanted to pick up the values for Japan, comma. We can now specify criteria range 2. So our second piece of criteria is that we only want to see the units sold for Japan for whatever year is selected. So criteria range 2 is going to be the year. So we go back to pivot tables. Let's select our year column, Control Shift down arrow, comma, and our criteria is going to be whatever is the selected year down here. Remember, this changes depending on what we've selected in that combo box. F4 to lock, close the bracket, hit enter, and now I can copy this formula down. So everything is set up so far to link through. Notice the top value here, 238569. If I go to the dashboard and change this to 2020, you can see that these values have completely updated. Now we're going to do something similar for the other charts. So this is one table that is basically going to provide us with the number of orders by product chart and also the cost versus profit. Now this time the breakdown is by the product. But we still want to pick out the data not only by the product, but also by whatever year has been selected. So when we're looking at number of orders, this time we want to do a count ifs because again, we have two pieces of criteria. What is our first criteria range? Well, our criteria is going to be the product, so our criteria range is also going to be the product. So let's select the product range, Control Shift down arrow, comma, and our product is going to be Kensington, comma, criteria range 2. Well, that is going to be the year. Control Shift down arrow, comma, and the year is going to be determined by whatever is in cell A15. F4 to lock, close the bracket, hit enter, and there we have our results. Let's copy this down. Now we're going to do the same for COGS and profit. And both of these are going to be sum ifs calculations, so pretty much the same as what we've done here. The only difference is that instead of selecting the country column, we're going to select the product column. So let's type in equals sum ifs. What is our sum range? Well, this time we're summing the COGS. So we're going to go back to pivot tables and we're going to choose the COGS column. Control Shift down arrow to select all, comma. What is our first criteria range? Well, our criteria range is going to be the product. Control Shift down arrow to select that range. The criteria, if we go back to calculations, is the product. Criteria range 2, well, that is going to be the year again. So back to pivot tables, select the year, Control Shift down arrow, comma. What is the criteria? Well, the criteria is going to be generated by cell A15. F4 to lock. Close the bracket, hit enter, and then we can copy that down. And we're going to do exactly the same for the profit. It's the same sum ifs calculation, but the sum range is just the profit column as opposed to the COGS column. So I'm going to leave you to do that and have a little practice, and I will join you in the next lesson to continue this dashboard. So we're making pretty good progress on setting up the calculations for our dashboard. The only other calculations we need to do are the calculations that we need for those high-level headings. I'm talking about these ones at the top here, highest number of orders, highest costs, and most profitable. Now, because of the way that we've set this up, we can utilize the information in this table and just basically find the maximum value in each of these columns. And what I want is the value and also the label, in this case, the product. So all we need to do here to find the highest number of orders is equals max and select our range, close the bracket, hit enter, and there is our highest number of orders. So we need to do the same for the others. So this time max, and this is going to be of that COGS column, hit enter, and then finally max of the profit column, like so. Now, in order to find the corresponding label, i.e. which product has the highest number of orders, the highest costs, and the top profit, we need to do an index and match again. So we're going to type in equals index, our array. So our array is always what we want to return. So I want to return the product, so this is my array. The row number, well, we can automate that using match, and I want to find this lookup value. And we're going to look for that in the number of orders range. And we're doing an exact match. Close off match, close off index, hit enter, and now I can see that 171 relates to the Vermont product. We're going to do exactly the same for these others. Index. What do we want to return? We want to return the product. How are we going to find that? Well, we're going to match this lookup value in this lookup array, and we're doing an exact match. Close off both brackets and hit enter. And then finally, we're going to do an index. Again, we want to find the product. We're going to use match to automate. This is the lookup value. we're looking for it in the profit column this time, and we're doing an exact match. Close both brackets and hit enter. Now for this one, it looks like Vermont is the best-selling product for 2020. Let's quickly change the drop down up here to 2018. And if we look at our calculations, I can see that now that has changed slightly. Highest cost is Burlington, top profit is Mandarin. So everything is flowing through really nicely. Now those are pretty much all of the calculations that we need. The only other things we need to add before we start assembling all the different moving parts onto the dashboard are the charts that we want to use. Now I'm only adding 3 charts. You might choose to add a lot more than that. Now, as I said, the charts that I'm using are not pivot charts because we haven't actually created any pivot tables. So if we go across to the Chart Units Sold tab, currently I have nothing on here. Now, where am I going to get the information for my chart? Well, if we go back to our Calculations tab, this contains the information that I want to use in this chart. I have a breakdown of the countries and the amount of units sold. Now, this actually shouldn't be in dollars because this is the number of units sold effectively. So I'm quickly going to change that just to number. Let's take down those decimal places and I will add a comma separator. So what I can do here is I can simply select this data range, go up to Insert, and then select a chart. So this first one is going to be a bar chart. And I'm going to select it, Control X to cut, and we're just going to paste it over on the Units Sold tab. And of course, we can apply whatever formatting we want. So let's quickly do some formatting here. Let's change these bars to green. I'm going to make the gap width a little bit less. In fact, quite a bit less. Let's add some data labels, and I'm going to put these on the inside base this time. I'm also going to format these. Let's make them bold and also white. And because I have them there, I don't really need this axes. Let's delete it out. And I think I'm going to change this title as well. Don't really need it to say sum ifs. We just want it to say units, sold. I'm going to make this title slightly bigger and also bold, and let's make it dark green as well. And just for fun, let's add a little trend line in so we can see the trend of that data. Now, of course, you could go into a lot more detail about how you format your charts, but just for quickness, we're going to leave it just there. Now, this is all well and good, but currently this chart isn't linked in any way, shape or form to the combo box over here. And what we ideally want is that when we put this chart on the dashboard and we switch between these different years, the chart is going to update. So how do we get this chart to link through to that combo box? Well, we have to think a little bit outside the box here. The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to use a very small pivot table, but I'm going to use it in a slightly different way to what we have been using them. So let's go back to our pivot tables data source and create ourselves a pivot table. We're going to create it from a table or range, and I'm going to place it on an existing worksheet because I want it to go onto the units sold worksheet. And click on OK. Now, I don't want it over there. Let's just cut and paste this over here. Now, the only thing I want to display in this pivot table is the year. So I'm going to grab the year field and I'm going to drop it into columns so that we have our years running across. What I'm also going to do is turn off these grand totals. We don't need those for what we're doing here. Now, underneath my little pivot table, I'm going to create another index formula. I'm going to type in index, and I'm going to index the years just here. And for the row number, we're going to go across to our calculations page, and we're going to use this cell just here, A12. F4 to lock that in place. Close the bracket and hit enter. So now, notice it's on 2018. If I select 2019 in here, that also updates, and so does my chart, because everything is linking through. The chart data is coming from the calculations page. It's coming from this table, and these values depend on whatever is in this cell over here. So when this changes, these values change, and in turn, this chart changes as well. So I'm sure you can see that when it comes to designing dashboards that are a little bit more complex, it can get quite complicated. Now we're pretty much going to use this same process to create our other charts. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy my pivot table across to these other pages. And now let's create our second chart, and this one is going to be orders by product. So if we go back to our calculations page, I want to use this table just here. Now I don't want to use the entire table to create my chart, I just want to use these two columns. I want the product and the number of orders. So if I select these two columns, go up to Insert, and this time we're going to do Control X to cut it, and I'm going to paste it over here, Control V. And we can now go through and apply our formatting. So let's change this to a different color scheme. This time we are going to format the data series, and we're going to make that donut hole size quite a bit smaller. Let's add some data labels. I'm going to make this donut chart a bit bigger. Let's move that down there. And I'm also going to move the position of this legend to the right-hand side. And of course you can just jiggle this around and position things wherever you see fit. Now I think I'm also going to make these labels slightly bigger, in bold, and let's make them white. Now my title here is going to be Number of Orders by Product. Let's do the final chart. This one is going to show the cost versus profit, and it's going to be a line chart. So this time from this little table, I want to have the product, and then I want the costs and the profit included in my chart. Up to Insert, let's choose a line chart, and I'm going to choose this one just here. Control X to cut it, and we're going to place it on the correct tab. Let's drag this out, make this quite a bit wider. I'm going to move the legend up to the top. Let's give this chart a title. So we'll just say cost versus profit by product. And let's change the color scheme just to keep this similar to everything else. Let's go for that green color scheme. And that is pretty much it. We're now at the stage where we're ready to put everything together onto the dashboard. So now we have pretty much all of the information that we need for our dashboard. All we need to do now is put it all together. Now let's start out with the easiest thing first of all, and that is just to move the charts across to the dashboard. So if we go back to our first chart, let's pick it up, Control C, and simply paste it, Control V, on the dashboard. And of course you can organize these however you want, so I'm going to make this a little bit wider. Let's go to our next chart. Let's grab this one, Control C, go to our dashboard, Control V to paste, and this one is just going to go directly next to it. Now I'm going to try my best to get all of this lined up so it looks quite neat. Okie dokie. Let's do our final chart. Control C, go across to the dashboard, Control V, and this one we're just going to make the full width of both of these. So we can just drag that out. Now also notice that all of these charts have a very faint border around the outside, so you might want to remove that to keep it nice and clean looking. So unfortunately you have to do this one at a time, so let's click the first chart, let's go to Format, and let's say that we want no outline. Let's do the same for these others, no outline, and the final one down here, no outline. And if we want to actually see these in action, if we click the drop down, watch for all the changes across the charts. You can see that everything updates. Such a cool way of controlling multiple charts. The final things we need to add here are our headline statistics. So that's these ones at the top and also our gross sales for each of the different countries. Now we have all of this information in our calculations workbook. So all we really need to do here is link to the cells that contain the correct information. So for this, we're going to start out by drawing a text box. And I'm going to draw this underneath highest number of orders. Now by default, your text box is going to be white. We're going to get rid of that background fill in a moment. Now when you're linking to cells, you want to make sure that your cursor is up in that formula bar. And we need to type in equals. Let's jump across to our calculations worksheet because the first value we want to pick up is the highest number of orders. And as we know, that is down here. So in this little table where we have our max value, I could choose to show the value or I could choose to show the label, the product. Now it's more meaningful if we show the product, so I'm going to link to this cell just here and hit enter. And you can see that that pulls that through. So let's do a bit of formatting. Let's put this into the middle. I'm going to make it slightly bigger. Let's widen this out. I'm going to change the font color to white, and then we're going to change the background fill to no fill, and we also don't want a border. And there we go. Now I'm going to copy this text box across for these other two. So Control D. Let's drag this into place underneath highest costs. This time I want to link to a different cell, so up to the formula bar. Let's type in equals, go back to calculations, and this time we want this one just here, and hit enter. Now all of these appear to be Vermont for 2020, so these do change when we change the year. And we need to go in and apply the same formatting. Like so. Let's do Control D to copy again. Let's change our formula, so equals, we want to go back to the calculations page, and this time we want cell D23. Hit enter and apply our formatting. And if you want to make sure that all three of these text boxes are lined up, you can select them all and then use your alignment tools on the shape format ribbon. So in Align, I can say that I want to align them all to the top, like so. Let's check to make sure these are working. So let's click the drop down, go to 2018, and I can see that yes, those are updating. The final information that we need to add are the gross sales for each of the countries. And we're going to do this in exactly the same way. We're just linking via a text box. So where are these calculations? Well, let's have a look at our calculations tab. And actually looking at this, I don't have the information that I need. So I'm going to quickly add something else to my calculations area. I'm going to copy this table, Control C, and let's put this down here, Control V. And I'm going to give this a heading. We're going to say gross sales by country. And let's apply the same formatting using the Format Painter. Now what I want to work out here is not the units sold. We want to do a sum ifs so that we can find the gross sales by country and by the selected year. So this needs to be gross sales. We're going to do sum ifs. The sum range, if we go back to our pivot tables workbook, the sum range is the gross sales. So let's Control Shift down arrow to select. Criteria range 1, well, that is going to be the country range. So let's select Control Shift down arrow. The criteria is going to be the country. And then our criteria range 2 is going to be the year. So back to our pivot table, let's select year, Control Shift down arrow, comma, and the year is going to be picked up from cell A15. F4 to lock, close the bracket, hit enter, and now I have that data and I can copy it down. Let's apply some currency formatting and take those decimal places down. So now I have this data, I can link to this from the dashboard. So let's go to the dashboard. We're going to insert another text box. This time we're going to type in equals. We're going to jump across to the calculations worksheet and we want to pick up that value for Japan and hit enter. Let's change the formatting. We're going to say no fill and no outline. Now let's duplicate this text box, Control D. Let's drag that across and now we can simply change the cell that we're linking to. So let's delete everything out, equals, and select the value for India, hit enter, and we're going to repeat this process. Control D, drag it across, equals, let's pick up the value for the UK and hit enter, Control D again, and this one is going to be for the US. So let's grab that figure and hit enter. Now again, with all of these, if you want to make sure that they are aligned, you can select them all and use your alignment tools to align them to the top, middle or bottom. So let's say top and click away. And that is our dashboard complete. Let's make sure this is working. Let's select a different year from that drop down, and would you take a look at that? All of our headings at the top here update, as do all of our charts. So hopefully that has given you a taster of dashboards. Things can get a lot more complex than what I've shown you here, but I feel that this is at a pretty good level as we're coming towards the end of this intermediate course. It's also been a good opportunity to practice some of those really important formulas and skills we've learned in earlier sections. If you managed to follow along with all of that, then well done. This is pretty complex stuff. I'm pretty happy with what we've created, so I'm going to grab a cup of tea and then I will meet you in the next section. It's time now for us to do exercise 9. And this exercise is a little bit different to the other exercises in that there is no right or wrong answer. So I don't have an answer to show you. Because there are so many different ways that you can build a dashboard, I'm just going to leave it to you to have an experiment and a play around. Now, the dashboard that we created during the course was a reasonably complex one using calculations. Now, if you don't feel confident enough, or maybe you don't even have the time to create a dashboard with lots of complex calculations, you can just create a very simple dashboard using pivot tables and pivot charts. So it might be that you want to approach it in that way. So what I'm doing here is I'm giving you a starting point. So we have our data, it's in a table, and we can go now and create different pivot tables, rearrange them in different ways, and then create different pivot charts to represent different metrics. So maybe if you don't want to go down the calculations route, maybe create 3, 4, or maybe even 5 different pivot charts based off of this pivot data. Maybe add some slices and connect those slices to the pivot charts. And remember, you can make your life a lot easier by copying the worksheet and simply rearranging the pivot table fields instead of creating a pivot table from scratch each time. Also, something to think about is your dashboard design. So you're going to want to create a new worksheet and call it dashboard, and then kind of plot out or plan where you want your pivot charts to go, and things like the overall color scheme, whether you want to add formatting or icons or pictures, things like that. So this exercise is really a good opportunity for you to just take a data set, create lots of different pivot tables and pivot charts, analyze your data in different ways, and then assemble a dashboard. It might be that you want to add some headline statistics at the top by linking to different cells. That's a fairly straightforward calculation to do. But really, I'm just going to leave this exercise open for you to have a play around. So I'm going to leave this with you. Good luck. I hope you create an absolutely amazing dashboard.
If you're not a subscriber, click down below to subscribe so you get notified about similar videos we upload. To get the course exercise files and follow along with this video, click over there. And click over there to watch more videos on YouTube from Simon Says It.